In this module or chapter, you are going to be introduced to QBE, and hopefully by the end of the chapter, you will be able to describe the relational model and understand QBE, and also use criteria when creating QBE queries, use functions, and create calculated columns, as well as sort data and join table. So in this class, we're mainly going to look at relational databases, which are basically just a big collection of tables where each entity is stored in its own table. And then relationships are implemented through common columns in two or more tables. A relation is a table where entries are single valued, each of your columns or your field is going to have a distinct name. All values in a column are going to be values of the same attribute. The order of the columns doesn't matter, but each row is distinct. In a relational database, your database structure is going to be represented by writing the name of the table, followed by a list of all the columns, and those will be in parentheses. Each table should appear on its own line. And then each table is also going to have its own primary key, which is a column or collection of columns of a table that uniquely identifies a given row in that table. And you learned all about that in the last couple weeks. So this week we're really going to focus on query by example. And a query is just a question that is written in a way that the database management system can recognize it. And QBE is a visual approach to writing queries where you actually ask your questions using an on-screen grid, and then data will appear on the screen for you. And we're going to be using Access to write our queries. So last week you were able to perform queries simply by looking at a table, and you might have had a question that said list all of the customers that have names that start with C's. And you could tell that information simply by looking at your table and, handwriting out or hand pulling out all those customer names that start with C's. But we can use QBE to have Access pull that information for us, and that's what we'll do more of this week. So when you look at the query window in Access, you will see that it does have two panes, and we're going to look at those in just a second, but you will see that the upper pane contains a field list for each of the tables that you want to query, and the lower pane will contain the design grid, which is where you can do different things such as specify the format of the output, the fields that you want included, the sort order, and so on. So looking at this example database, to look at that query window, I would need to click Create and then choose Query Design. Now you can create queries using the wizard, which will walk you through the creation of queries, but mostly we're going to focus on doing it a little bit more manually using Query Design. And you can see that the first step is going to be to choose which table you are querying. So if I was looking for customer names that start with something specific, then of course that would be done using probably that customer table. So you can just double click it, click Add to add that customer table to your query pane, and then you can just close that dialog box. And as you can see, I double clicked it twice, so I accidentally added it twice. I can just right click and choose Remove to remove it. So there in my upper portion I have the field list, the lower pane is my design grid. And if I want to include a field in my Access query, I simply double click it to place it in the design grid, and then I can click Run to see the results of my query. So for example, if I want to see just customer names, I can double click it and it will appear down here in my design grid, and then I can click Run to see that query. So that's a very, very, very simple little query that I can use just to kind of show you that's how we get started.